We're minnows. Some of us need to turn ourselves into sharks. We've created an asset that nobody believed could be an asset. So that's already from zero to something.
Because you've got cash now, you can work through to that point, 2022. What we can't do is burn through 14 million in cash, because that was given to you on the premise that you were going to make acquisitions. So is your business plan alive and well?
Yes, we want to develop into a tier one, multi-project, multi-mine.
Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. First of all, thanks so much for watching this video. If you like it, give us a thumbs up and do leave your comments below. It just helps us understand what you're thinking, what sort of questions we should be asking, and indeed your thoughts on the company itself. And if you haven't already done so, please click the button in the corner of the screen to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, to see more videos like this, click the notification bell. We spoke earlier today to John Borshoff, who's the CEO of DYL. He was the founder and CEO of Paladin, built up from 2 million up to a $4 billion business before Fukushima occurred and fell back down at equally rapid speeds. But we talked to John about his slightly contrarian view of the marketplace. They're looking for inorganic growth, a M&A strategy to acquire cheap, valuable assets around the world, and of course to develop their Namibian asset. We talked to him about how things are going. He did promise an acquisition last quarter, or announcement of one. That didn't happen. We asked why. He talks to us about price recovery in the marketplace and how he thinks this thing is going to play out. He would admit that he's got to talk his playbook just as much as fund managers need to talk theirs. So it's just interesting to kind of hear an alternative view. We talk about a lot of different topics, so please take a look in the description below. If there's anything that interests you in particular, we went through a lot over the course of the hour. Just click on that relevant timestamp and it will take you to that part of the video. But let's hear what John had to say. Hello, John. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Good to be back again.
Yeah. Wait, so where are you speaking from?
From Perth, at my house. We're all isolated in Perth like everybody else.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I've spoken to a few boys from Perth over the past couple of weeks. I think you've got nice weather, but you're holed up at home. Following regulations and rules. Good on you. We spoke back in September at WNA. A lot of things have happened since then. I guess we'll get into it in a second. But for people new to the story, can you give us a 1-minute overview?
Right, so DYL is an advanced exploration company now entering in a pre-development phase. We've got assets in Namibia, and we have got a PFS going on one of them. We've got a Japanese farm in on another, and we've then also got an inorganic sort of growth strategy as well in the sector consolidation. So we think we sit fairly uniquely in the space. Okay,
beautiful. Now, like I said, lots have happened since September. I mean, crazy amounts has happened since September, especially the last 4 to 6 weeks. Can we just talk about that, the macro, about your view on the macro? Because obviously you when we spoke in September, you called a kind of longer term recovery, and I think you were right. But obviously, COVID-19 has suddenly thrown a spanner in the works. Well, certainly for you, but I think for the industry, it's there's a terrible thing to say, but it's kind of they've welcomed it because it's maybe created some catalysts which may change things around. Obviously, we had Cigar Lake shutting down for 4 weeks. That's now been, I think, extended. You've got the Kazakhs shutting down for 3 months. You've got a lot of action around the world, which is causing the supply side of the story to be affected. So what's your take on what's happened in the last 4 weeks globally?
Well, it still remains interesting in the sense that in September when we last spoke, the price was $28.50. And when you see the hullabaloo around, you'd think it'd be $40, $50. But it's $31, and so, and not sort of taking anything away from that. There has been some developments that they should be tempered with a little bit of sort of reality. Everybody wants things to happen quicker than later. If this is the catalyst that everybody's waiting, I'm a little bit doubtful, but certainly I'm really pleased that the market has been tested by a consequential event and that has bought out a few things that maybe will make the utilities sit up and sort of reassess. But I'm still a little bit cynical about when that reassessment will come to the sort of hotspot.
So, and tell me why you think that is, because obviously potentially that's taken a lot of production, a lot of pounds out of the market in terms of what was coming into the market. It may be, some people are talking about 20 million, others a little bit more, others a little bit less, but they're thereabouts. What do you know about the utilities options here? Because they seem, well, no one knows what they're doing. No one's got an idea. I mean, a lot of people kind of call 2019 as the year for recovery, except you. 2000 and people at the beginning of this year, before all this kind of COVID and the market reset, etc., people are maybe getting a little bit more realistic. Certainly some of the CEOs we spoke to are saying, well, perhaps Q3, Q4 this year, I think we'll start to see a turn, which is more in line with what you were calling last September, okay? Do you think the removal of these pounds from Cigar Lake, from Kazatomprom, are going to affect utilities' behaviour, or do they have something in reserve which we just aren't aware of?
I think the concentration on the quantity of pounds that are off the market is sometimes not the only issue that people should think about. This story started in January 2018 when Cameco came in and said, we're doing the temporary shutdown. This is what's going to happen. Please, Mr. Utility, be frightened. And of course, everything went on as sort of normal. People are taking stuff out of the market and nothing much happened. So now roll it down to today, which has been some serious and dramatic events. And Cameco and Kazatomprom, being very responsible people, they're top tier stuff. They say, look, we're doing this, but please, Mr. Consumer, don't worry, we will continue to provide you with product. So in that sense, the utilities, of course, believe these huge, responsible organisations, and that there's not going to be any shortage. 2023, when that shortage actually happens, is a long way away, and you've got, sort of these projects online. You've got a lot of people promising a lot of pounds. So I don't see that shockwave coming through to that extent. I do see that the real unknown is, how long can these operations stay offline? Because I don't see anything different in the pandemic as it is today, as it was 4 weeks ago, as it will be in 2 months ago. So these sort of steppy, jumping type things where, yes, there's a chance, no, look, we'll keep it. Really what we're doing it for is for our people, which is great, governance and all of that. But in this whole thing, there's got to be a sting in the tail to the utility. Say, look, this is, yes, we're doing it for this reason, but here's something else happening, and we want better prices or something. That hasn't hit, I don't think. So I wouldn't be surprised if in this sort of a little bit of a rise, it wouldn't surprise me if it sort of goes up to mid-30s and then comes back again and sits in that 30. Let's see what's happened. It's so volatile, but I think that the story has been out there for 2 years. To a degree, Kazatomprom has participated in that story. I'm down 10%. You didn't know where it's come from, but they said down. Poor old Cameco did go down, lost people, and now, however, I think more serious questioning will start happening.
That's interesting. You named a date, or a year there. You said when the shortages happen in 2023. So again, come back to the question, which is, what do you know? Do you think utilities can, get through to 2023 and still feel confident that they're going to be able to, have the supply of U3O8 that they need in reserve?
Yes. So I think that if you believe the WNA forecasting, which is another question we can go to, but let's say that's sort of there, and let's say the crossover is between 23 and 24, whenever that happens. So by the very nature of that curve, there is supply up till then. The curve shows that you're above the demand line, and they're eating into that little bit of inventory. So there's no threat until the shortage happens. So if people are looking 2 years out, it's once you're looking out beyond that, when you're in this sort of black territory, where yes, you have got some certainty with the idled capacity that's out there that will come online, which will be more difficult than one thinks about getting that online. It'll take a little bit longer. And to counterbalance that, it will be that the enrichment sort of component that feeds into supply will disappear, because by the very nature, demand is up. So the enrichers will be, more now concerned with providing real product rather than sort of spinning out this sort of yellow cake. So that's just going to balance what's lost from the enrichers, the capacity. 30, 40 million pounds on idle capacity, 30, 40 million pounds that enrichers are providing. That's going to evaporate with demand. So even now it comes, where is the new capital, the new capacity, and the time it'll take, the granularity in that sector. And I think, the utilities and the sector generally have to start looking and say, look, where the hell is going to be this going to come from? The builders, who are they? What are they? And I think that that's the area when the utilities start poking in that space where they're in sort of absolutely new product needed, and there's no response from existing producers. There is a response from the hopefuls, which has got a risk to it anyway. That's going to be longer than shorter, and so the consumer industry will start fighting itself and eating into itself. They'll be competing then for pounds that are available, which will be by very nature short. Not the only shortage above, it's the people are going to compete within the existing capacities and fighting for those pounds, and that's then the real catalyst.
So that's fascinating. Obviously, you're referring to WNA numbers 23, 24 for the crossover. Yeah. Obviously, with these pounds coming off it's only been a month, but yes, the view is that it may go on 3, it may go on 6. Yeah. With those pounds coming out, that will bring forward that date. So it may be 2022, 2023. But your view is there's still enough inventory out there for, obviously the Kazakhs have enough inventory to supply their contracts, and they only do contracts. But you think Cameco will find it easy to fulfill their contracts that they've got for this year?
I think it'll just become a bit more expensive, because it's against what they're realising with their contracts, what price they're realising, around plus or minus 40 plus or minus $2, and they've been buying it at 23, 24. There's a big coupon there. Now it gets to they're buying it at 32, 33. All of a sudden, there's not a big clip on the coupon going through. So then there's other pressure that companies will have to think of. Say, goodness me, we'd better start this bloody old crank handle of a project and start producing at lower prices and get the margin up at whatever. Look, there are all sorts of quandaries and predicaments on how you start up, and if it's a slow price move, in other words, it goes up but it's going slow, that's going to be causing a lot of trouble with people, even the ones that have got mothballed capacity, because they want it to go up so they can capture some of the upside contracts and improve on their deteriorating position today. Whereas, of course, Kazatomprom is in a slightly different position, because Kazatomprom works on spot price. So it doesn't have, to worry about locking in term prices, having that sort of security of supply. And but they all meet finally the problem of the market. What are people playing? Because you can lock in a contract that's spot for as many years as you do on a long-term fixed price contract, And if you've got a belief in spot going up, you're happy.
But you don't believe it's going to. Well, you think it may get up to the mid-30s and then maybe roll back because there's no certainty in the market about what's going on with COVID-19. Okay,
yes.
I do buy that. We're all running around like headless chickens, not quite sure. Every day is different, right? But in the uranium space, people are talking about this supply-demand gap, and everyone's a believer of the macro. We big bar. Every CEO should be talking about it, and they are. But it's this uncertainty around how much inventory is sitting out there and what the options utilities have that is causing consternation. So, if let's say you're right, it goes up to about 35. Rolls back a little bit. It's not enough to move the dial, get people into production, or even be able to go and have conversations about getting funding to get into production, right? So when do you think it's going to, at what point do you think it's going to move from that mid-30s number up to something more reasonable, like, I think people about 4 handle, 40 something, to be able to allow them to get financing, to allow them to think about getting back into production? What's your view on the timing on that?
So my view is that I think we've got this horrible twilight zone, which will be 30, mid-30, where, it's good, compared to what it was, it is, but it's not anything to build an industry on. And then you'll get let's say, a range of 40 to 50. So in that sort of situation, you by very nature then, if it goes 40 to 50, that means, demand's there. That means more product has to go from the enrichers into to the consumers as fuel. That means that is evaporating. The mothball company, the mothball comes in, it's justified. They can reset at 45 or 48, whatever they want, and you'll get that fixed amount of product will come back in the market over 5 to 9 months. It'll take that much for people to get things sorted. There's going to be finance required. There's some juniors out there that want to fire up, all of that. So it's not going to all come in together. There's crews to establish. There's normal issues. So now that all it's doing is maintaining the status quo of what it is today. It's not bringing any more. It's all it is you say, I'm translating the enriched material, from the underfeeding that's coming across. Now I'm in that place, I'm bringing in the mothballed capacity. So status quo. So now we're not talking about this. What we're talking about, a shortage, is over and above this. The one is a translation of supply from one place to the producers, and the other is new capacity, new infrastructure, and all of these sort of things. That becomes a different story. That becomes and all the companies, and no matter what they are, and let's say they all can do it, but all of them can't do it in 2023, 2024. Some of them, if you've got to say, oh, look, I need a $70 price, that might put it out to 2025. Nobody's going to finance them at today's price. And how do you finance today for an outcome in 2025 when you can't raise the finance on that price at the time, which might be 50? So you can only organise all of your things when the price is reached, not in anticipation of that price. Maybe a utility will come in and forward buy and anticipate that future, but very rarely will they lock in a price that much and reset the whole market. So there's a whole lot of things that sort of fire up, and really the canary in this uranium mine is actually spot price. Spot is more reactive. Yeah, we say, oh no, it doesn't matter, and then long term follows it, because it is an indicator of sort. If spot is staying out there, and let's say it goes to $50 tomorrow, and they say, oh no, it was only one trader got caught and he had to do it. Well, let's say it stays a bit. Well, all of a sudden it authenticates long-term pricing. And so each will play and jockey each other along in terms of where price will reach. But the whole event of getting new capacity into the sector is not as simplistic as people think. Oh yeah, we'll get the crossover and then boom, 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 all these people will happen. The realities of financing, staff, a bloody whole lot of things will start coming in and affecting
right,
even on the best model.
beautiful. Okay, so that leads nicely on to where I want to start getting into with you, which is around juniors. Juniors with teams have not been in the industry. You're, I think, widely acknowledged as being the father of this industry with your huge success at Paladin, and obviously it came off as quickly as it went up after Fukushima. But nevertheless, you built that company into a $4 billion company. That's from 2 million. So you saw the gamut, right? Yeah. So I do appreciate you understand how to build a company in the right market conditions. So we are not in the right market conditions now. There's a lot of juniors out there who are just either hunkered down or trying to raise capital. We've seen a couple fail to raise capital in the market because the generalist funds are not yet confident. The specialist funds aren't actually that big and perhaps can't keep plowing the capital in. What's going to happen to those companies? Do you think that they're going to be swallowed up? Because we're going to lead very quickly onto your business model in a second here, I suspect. But do you think what do these companies need to do to survive? And do you think they're going to be able to attract the capital now in today's conditions, or even pre-COVID conditions, to get through to where you think the market's going to turn, which is, let's face it, towards the end of this year by the sounds of it?
So one of the big differences in this market compared to what it was on the upside of when I got Paladin going is that there were a lot of people with a lot of money in the industry that wanted to secure their project pipelines. Rio, Cameco, Areva, or now Orano, and the Russians. So there was a lot of money, even the Russians through Uranium 1 that was back. So in that way, there was an exiting ability here to say, well, look, I've taken this project to this level honourably. I go now, give it to this other company, and off it goes. So that's how a lot of these express themselves through the system. What happens now? There are not that many swallowers around. You can argue that the Camecos, the Kazatomprom are there. They've got a few ideas, maybe for some other extra things, but not that aggressive within the system. So now it becomes, where do the juniors, and I consider ourselves in that capacity, I think, where do they get? What do they do? And I won't go into the individual abilities of each of these, but the juniors are eternal optimists. So they will never admit to not being able to do something. In fact, the very reason they're there is because that's the nature of the beast. But even realistically, people can see that maybe a 2 + 2 can make an 8, rather than just burrowing down with your own project, not seeing something that the sector needs, and they may not be in a position to drive that themselves. So it needs a pragmatic thinking from some particular juniors to say, look, if we do X and Y, this is what can happen. But there's a lot of Ys, but there's not many X's around, and how this can happen. I consider maybe another one that I know, and but it's a scarred area of post Chernobyl, as I've said before, post Fukushima, a very, very tortured sort of industry, and that reflects a lot in the people that are there, commendably hanging on. But there's got to be some unraveling here, I think, in terms of making a legitimate other cornerstone company in this sort of supply chain. And I'm not counting the next gen. They're big project, whatever happens to that, they're standalones. But these ones that are a bit smaller, more expensive, they've got to be fit into a different sort of trajectory, I guess.
So given you said there's no swallowers, to use your phrase, out there, some of these juniors are, down to hundreds of thousands of dollars left in the bank. If they can't attract money, and some of them haven't been able to attract the sorts of money that they need, because it's a very unattractive sort of money. They're asking for money just to pay salaries and keep the lights on, not to do any work. There's no value being created. So dollar for dollar, your dollar is becoming worth zero, in effect, as an investor. Okay, that's the way I think about these things. So it's unattractive investment. Without any buyers out there, though, there's no one going to come in and do a takeover of the company or an asset purchase, because no one's going to get funded for acquiring uranium at the moment, are they?
Well, it depends on what you can do with a story. That's right, because here comes the guy and he's got a project, and he's there and he says, I'm going to do something heroic, and they say, well, oh yeah, okay. But if you present then from another platform where things start resonating, yeah, this can be done, we can work it. There's a certain track record about it, and I'm not sort of blowing the trumpet of the, but it's there to be exploited, and that's where I see, and I think it's essential that the industry does something like this, not for Deep Yellow or anybody, but basically for the industry, for the sector. The minnows, you know what I mean? We're minnows, and some of us need to turn ourselves into sharks and play in the big pool, and that is what then makes, solidifies the supply sector. Doesn't have to be very much, but all of a sudden it starts getting a newness, and it's rejuvenated, and it's there ready for the next 30, 40 years. So that's where I see the very interesting possibilities, and I always have done, particularly in this Deep Yellow life that I've got, and whereas it was a bit different in the previous Paladin startup, different dynamics. So where it is then is, as I say, it's not the good idea that counts, it's the willingness of those parties to see that, and to see that, a translation in value for everybody's shareholders, to create some, and doable, and that is deliverable on, and so consumers can say, I really trust this, and there are investors willing to back that model.
Okay, so let's come on to this. Let's come on to your business model, okay? Because some people are going to accuse you of saying, well, of course John's going to say that because it suits his business model that he's been pushing. You've talked about counter-cyclical strategy. You've talked about inorganic growth, and funders do listen to you because of what you did at Paladin. You can walk into most boardrooms and have that conversation with them, but. Yeah, and you've got cash in the bank now, cash enough to do what you need to do in Namibia. But do you think that what's happening in the market with this macro event in the marketplace, do you think now is a time that you could pick up at the right price certain assets that maybe you've already been looking at them, or do you think things just got a little bit more expensive for you?
Well, if they get expensive, it's relative expensive. If your own share price goes up and they do, well, that's just a crossover. So that doesn't worry me too much. What'll happen in this period is that companies have had a very good increase. Their market caps are going up 40%. There's a sort of an enthusiasm, and so people can do some more small raisings, put some more oxygen in the tank. And the uncertainty that they have in terms of survival gets a little bit better to handle. So in that way, M&A becomes a little bit harder. But for those that want to really sort of establish something for their shareholders in a real sense, and not just surviving, you've just got to look at the companies that are today and consistently doing work for value adding beyond just polishing up one asset, and there's not too many of those, and it's symptomatic of the whole industry. They've done their work. Well, what do I do? rehash another feasibility study that is there, and even though they're not giving much return anymore because they're at the margin. There's no big breakthrough there. So in that way, I still think there's room with chosen companies to really drive the concept and really create something. And that's the conversation.
Okay, but you did say that you were going to do a deal. You were going to announce a deal last quarter.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, what happened was we things are delayed. Companies say, "Oh, look, I need to do this before I can talk." So all of a sudden, it goes to early this year. Another company we're looking at, it's been in sort of hibernation, so it takes a lot to get everything together. And they are now coming. And I agree. If anything that I can be accused of is to say, well, bloody hell, why hasn't anything happened here? And basically that last raising in July of last year was on the back of really doing some M&A. Now we're advancing on that, and there's certainly we're striving for some interesting possibilities, because it's not just it's not just the assets that count here. It's the vehicle within which the assets are and what can be done with them and what you can then create from that. And I have no doubt we'd be a plus on that on many fronts. And so it has come at a point where we really need to deliver. Yes, this price volatility will make it a little bit more. Well, I don't think more difficulty, because some of these companies are running without a pilot in the cockpit. So that's a big job to sort of recharge it and say, and what are we going to do? Well, we've got this project, and well, what are we going to do then? Well, what? That's right. And so they're the issues. There's no question the Namibian projects are advancing well ahead of expectation, and to counter that, some of our M&A is a little bit slow as far as what we can talk about.
Right. Okay. So the market conditions haven't really helped discussions for you, because you may have the view that it'll go to mid-30s, slope back, and actually nothing's really going to change till, let's say, 23 is using your dates, right? But if no one else believes that, then that's going to make your negotiations harder, because you have to take your stance to suit your business model. They need to take theirs to maximize whatever paltry return they can squeeze out of any negotiations with you. So those are tough discussions. But do you think you're going to be able to get something over the line this quarter? Or do you think market conditions suggest even that's going to be put out?
There's a good chance.
Okay, I'll take that.
And yeah.
Okay, so when we talked again last September, you were talking about this multi-asset strategy, global multi-asset strategy.
Yeah.
The reality is today you've got one asset in Namibia. You're doing a feasibility study on that, and you just said things are going well there. Obviously, we spoke with Marinika recently, actually, and they had some drill results. And what I know you can't talk about it too much, but but do you see that similar sort of grade for yourself? What sort of clues can we get about how things are going and what you're seeing in Namibia?
Well, what I'm seeing in Namibia is this big asset we've uncovered, which in itself has, even at a production double what we've announced would be the initial target, it's got 20 years plus life, and that's yet a lot of work, but for sure the scoping study model of about £3 million over the 20 years is possible, and that's only using a 20 kilometre radius of the ore body, which is coming out 50 kilometres. So any project that is adjacent will be looked at a supplementary additive pounds to that, looking well down. And so when you NPV that out, it's not that much, so it might as well stay with where it is. and as one strategy. And Marinika is doing some good work. They're trying. They're gallant, and putting some things together. But it's not as if that is necessary for our business model, our development model. If we were short of pounds, yes, they'd say, okay, yeah, there's some reason to really talk today, but no.
What do you think of their intellectual property?
Well, yeah. All I say is we had that intellectual property signed up to us and we withdrew. That's on public record.
Enough said.
And not one way or the other. Just it just didn't suit us. It might suit other people. And
understood. Now Namibia, Rossing, Husab. Rossing shut down. Husab restricted in their production. We don't know by what quantity, but they're saying producing but restricted. What are you finding yourself in Namibia? I mean, are things slowing down? Are you being affected? What is the government telling you?
Well, the government are really, here's a country that's got 2 million people. It's relatively not cash rich. It's got a pandemic in its back door that can be sort of fairly devastating to these poor communities, and they've come up to speed, very, very quickly, making some adult decisions on how to tackle this while preserving some of their industries. So the whole thing is, yes, there's the exempt ones, food and you name it, security and medical, and then there's the critical services one, of which mining is one of them. Now, in the mining, they made two announcements, clarified the minister on his second announcement, and essentially what they want to do is that while this is in steady as it goes, but really leaving it up to the operator what they think should be happening, and where each operation is not the same. One guy can say, look, I'll stop my mining and I'll continue producing full blast because of stockpiles. Another one has to do mining. So each one has to pick and choose differently from where it is, in its sort of, stage of whatever. So I think the industry is doing very well. It's sort of trying to apply the Australian model, where Australia has got an industry that's going. They're working it with lockdown, with procedures, and all of this. The thing is, like anything that where I feel a little bit a bit annoyed, is that a lot of people use the shade under the pandemic tree to make decisions which are not necessarily because of the pandemic. And this is a human nature thing. So I think that in that sense, the countries leave themselves a little bit exposed, where some companies undertook honourably to do this and this, and then up comes this thing and say, oh well, we're now going to do that, and nobody can argue against them. So there's going to be a little bit of fallback because of that, and some of them are genuine because they were going to anyway by the end of the year because of certain mine criticality and operations. But overall, I think Namibia is trying to do a good job, and recognising that it wants to keep the industry alive, so that it's still taxing down the runway, that it can take off pretty quickly and still produce. Husab is working to the extent where they had one case and managed it and didn't shut them down. They're all working through it. So that shows a commitment of both Husab and the government to take a pragmatic approach.
Okay, and what about Namibia generally? Before this, obviously, as you say, it's dependent on mining. It's very critical in terms of income taxes, etc., employment. Tell us a little bit about Namibia as a mining jurisdiction, because we've spoken to other CEOs with companies in there, obviously Marinika, Bannerman, etc.
So the countries like Namibia, they really they're working with a revenue side that doesn't quite match sometimes the expenditure side. There's employment issues to consider, and some of those say, oh yeah, it's overbloated public service. But you can understand this balancing act, and you can't be so sort of pragmatic that you just torch the whole place. So they do realise and they understand that there has to be some turnaround in commodities going forward that will then get them out of their current spot, and they try and limit taxes to the extent possible. There's a lot of discussions, this and that, and then finally there's a compromise between industry and government to reach there. So I think there's a genuineness about Namibia. There's a sophistication in the industry between the government, the executive, and industry bodies that represent industries, and so there's dialogue. So nothing sort of happens at the whim on one Saturday afternoon to say we're going to nationalise or something like that. So in that way, it's the country is good, and we just wish them well. That I think in the end, uranium will get them out of the NUA, and that's a 2-3 year issue. Maybe the more optimistic say it's earlier.
Okay.
But it's definitely showing signs that, goodness me, Namibia is a great uranium country, and it looks like there will be some recovery in uranium, which will have big positives for their position.
Okay, and so you're saying the PFS, your expectations are good. You've nothing to change your mind on that. Are you, and I guess because you've got cash, are you going to continue full steam ahead to try and get into a feasibility phase quickly? Or, I mean, what is your timing on that, actually? What's your expected timing?
The timing is that we will have a PFS by halfway through, let's say September, October.
Yeah.
This will be more than most PFSs because of what we can put into it while we're doing, and there's got to be a lot of other work that needs to be put in the feasibility stage, environmental, tuning up on process design, mining, and all of these sort of things. So what will happen though is in that September, October period, it will be a platform from which we will look at the market and to say where we want to do on our sort of landing for development decision. And so it's not going to be, a risk about process or anything like that. It's just the time of getting the mining lease application granted, getting, talking to people then about production to the potential customers at the appropriate time. So it might be that theoretically you say, right, by mid 2022 is a good time maybe to make a development decision. Okay. Hypothetically.
Okay, hypothetically.
And then we go to that on that schedule.
So, I mean, I'm just I want to bring it back to your belief in your business model, which is basically an acquisition model, right? Buying up globally, relatively inexpensive uranium assets, which you know how to develop because you've been there and done it before. The reality about, obviously, African assets, they're lower grade. The Canadians, bang on about their high grade stuff. Obviously, they've got permitting issues and licensing issues, so it swings and roundabouts. But Namibia isn't the stellar project that you expected to use as a springboard into this global acquisition strategy, is it?
Namibia has got a good chance for us making a tier 1 asset, and even if you say, oh yeah, well, let's see, it'll come out. And I'm not saying because of that we are putting all our eggs in that basket, but things are coming out at this stage showing good indicators, which we will state as we're going along. And there's no good talking too early. We gave a little bit of indication in the quarterly to say, this is where it is and how things are happening. And so there might be a good chance we could improve. It might be that what we're doing here has got implications for some other things that we can apply our learning now to that possibility, so that gives us another advantage. So no, I think that the Namibian project has got a good chance to be a good little solid project that may produce between 2.5 to 3.5, 4 million pounds a year.
But you're going to need a reasonable spot price to be able to do that, aren't you? Yeah. So it's an average. It's a good. I like that for a good solid project. It's not stellar. It's not exceptional, but it will at the right price produce. So your ambitions are going to be slightly stunted or restricted depending on what the market price is. But your expectation is you don't need to make a decision until 2022. And based on what you were saying, the market will have developed and evolved at that point. So because you've got cash now, you can work through to that point, 2022. What we can't do is burn through 14 million in cash, because that was given to you on the premise that you were going to make acquisitions. So is your business plan alive and well?
Yes, it is. And the other thing is that look, I want to park the project that if the spot price is not where I want it to be, we're not developing it. That's it, QED. What we have got when we say that is we've got surety that once we fire it up, we will deliver on pounds. So that's something that may or not may be attractive to the utility. The whole essence of our talk is that yes, we've got to deliver on the M&A side, and coupling that with what we're doing on the organic side, then you'll start seeing Deep Yellow resonating much more, because hell, this is happening, so there must be other things that may be happening. So yes, that is the pressure that we have, but the business model is clearly focused on us securing the other assets.
Right. And do you think, because of what you've done in the past, you have a right or more share of voice in the market when you're talking to funders who may have given you this money on the basis of acquisition, but they see what you're doing in terms of developing the Namibian asset, they see what's happened in the marketplace, they listen to your view of the future. Do you think you're going to be able to raise more capital between now and 2022 to make acquisitions which may or may not have just got a little bit more expensive?
I believe we can. I believe that, you see, there's two issues here. That the people that believe in the M&A of the company didn't believe in Namibia, even 3 years ago. So I've got a sort of balance to say, look, what we believe, I've got to take the footy and kick it, and not the spectator. Although I take notice of how they're cheering or booing, and gradually on that side, it's proven to be right what we said about we've created an asset that nobody believed could be an asset. So that's already from zero to something. So on that, and the market will start realising as we're announcing some things to say, by jingo, this is an asset. We've been discounting this totally. Since we made the announcement of the scoping study and the PFS, our share price has been going down. That's concerned me more for the share, but not concerned me for the future, because we're delivering something that yet people can't see. On the other side, then there's more people barracking for us to get an M&A. So I think that upgrade the expectation or realisation of what our Namibian asset is. Hell, it's better than I thought. And consolidate on a recognisable M&A asset, and that thing starts working together.
Well, tell me this. There's an interesting point. M&A for the sake of M&A is a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Okay. What are you looking for? What's the criteria by which you are judging deals which you've identified or are being put in front of you?
So basically, looking for geographic diversity. Looking for projects that we believe we can operate and produce at a price lower than what the people that have developed it or have got it together. That it gives us optionality. That once we have one or two of these projects on top of ours, as I said before, a utility can start saying, oh, it's not just this project, but if we get really short, we can participate in development of that project with the same expertise, same group, they know what they're doing. And so if it is that we're saying we want to develop into a tier 1, multi-project, multi-mine, over 7 years or more, just there's no big, it's the opportunity that dictates the years, not your plan, you know, and then as uranium prices goes up, you have that. As your market cap goes up, your opportunity to do even more consolidation increases. That's another story then, beyond this sort of 1-2 tango we're talking about.
Okay, John, I think we better leave it there. You've given us a lot of your time today. I appreciate, and it's getting late there, so I do appreciate you spending your time. Yeah, I bought what you said when you said in September about the timeline, and I think you may still actually be right despite COVID-19. It would be fascinating to see how this plays out, but it's changing on a daily, weekly basis at the moment. So, and lots of people on one side of the fence, and not so many sitting where you are. But we'll see who's right.
It'll be interesting.
It will be fascinating. It'll be fascinating, but it's all good for the industry as a whole. I think that's right. I did like talking your views on perhaps what some of the juniors may have to go through if you are right about your timing on market recovery and certainly price recovery, because it's just not going to move the needle enough for them to get funded or give funders the confidence to be able to fund them. So through no fault of their own, obviously. John, thank you so much for your time. We will catch you again soon.
I hope so. Thank you very much.